Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom. I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman for the National Public Diplomacy Directorate in the Office of the Prime Minister. This Wednesday, the 11th of December, day 432 of the October 7th war. Just a couple of points from me. Please put your questions in the chat. Some of you have already, together with your news outlet, and we'll get to each one of them. Just a couple of points to start off with. Firstly, it is my tragic duty to share with you the names of the fallen amongst Israel's armed forces since our last briefing. 816 soldiers have fallen. Staff Sergeant Barak Daniel Halpern was just 19 years old, and from Kiryat Ono he fell in battle in northern Gaza. Sergeant Omri Cohen was 19 years old, and from Ashdod he too fell in battle in northern Gaza, as did First Sergeant Ido Zano, who was just 20 years old, and from Yehud he was a combat medic. The Prime Minister expressed the condolences of the nation to the families of these heroic defenders of our country. The immense pain of these families and the families of all those who have fallen in our war of redemption is our pain. Together with the entire nation, he said, we embrace you from the depths of our heart. We are in an existential war that was forced upon us, in which we are defeating our enemies step by step. This is the testament to our fallen heroes, and this is the realization of the mighty spirit of the generation of victory. May the memories of our heroes be blessed and be in our hearts forever. On developments in Syria, Israel believes that the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria marks a pivotal shift in the Middle East. It dismantles a key element of Iran's axis of terror, and it weakens adversaries like Hezbollah and Hamas. It's clear that Israel's determined military strategy, the elimination of Nasrallah, the significant blows against Iran and their terrorist proxy should serve as a reminder of our commitment to our national security and our sovereignty, and particularly on the Golan Heights. To be clear, once again, we have no intention of interfering in Syria's internal affairs. We, in our turn, hope for neighborly relations. We want nothing more, but you will have heard by now that we have and we will continue to do what is necessary for our security. Our eyes are wide open. Israel's security forces attacked and destroyed stockpiles of strategic weapons in Syria for the sole purpose of preventing them from falling into the hands of terrorists. The new leadership in Syria does not need chemical weapons. So to be clear, we will not tolerate a situation in which the new regime in Syria allows Iran to reestablish itself in Syria and transfers weapons to Hezbollah or attacks Israel. Next, in Gaza, this morning, 4 projectiles were launched from central Gaza. 2 were intercepted by our Air Force and 2 fell in open areas in Israel. There were no injuries. Next, on Paraguay, I wanted to bring your attention that the president of Paraguay, President Peña, together with his delegation, is currently visiting Israel. Tomorrow, Israel and Paraguay will together inaugurate the Paraguayan embassy in Jerusalem, our eternal capital. So in the midst of complex times, this is a brave message of solidarity and support for the state of Israel. President Peña's moving words in which he said, we will always stand by Israel, no matter the cost, because this is the right side of history. So these comments most definitely illustrate the courageous and ethical leadership precisely in times when the world is faced with attempts to distort the truth. Israel thanks Paraguay for its friendship. And lastly, on COGAT and the humanitarian aid going into Gaza, let me share with you our latest figures on Monday: 201 humanitarian aid trucks entered Gaza, 55 entered Gaza directly through Gate 96. 6 tankers of cooking gas for essential infrastructure also went in. On Sunday, 4 water trucks and 2 wastewater trucks were delivered to international institutions in Gaza. They were donated by the UAE and they went through Kerem Shalom. We certainly want to improve the logistical capabilities of international organizations operating in Gaza and support efforts to enhance sanitation conditions in preparation for the winter. Let me give you our very latest figure from today. As of today, 1,178,488 tons of aid have gone into Gaza. Let me repeat that figure. As of today, 1,178,488 tons of aid have gone into Gaza. Now, this means medical supplies, it means food, it means shelter, it means humanitarian aid. All this has been facilitated by COGAT. The IDF and COGAT acts in accordance with international law. Hamas, on the other hand, want to starve their own people, but Israel is getting the food in. So that's the end of our briefing here today. Please put your questions in the chat and we'll get to them individually. First question here I can see is from David Clement from the News Forum in Canada. Has the Israeli government spoken to the new leadership in Syria? What has their response been to the strikes on military targets in Syria? Thank you for that question, David. I haven't got any additional information for you on that. Perhaps I could share with you the strikes that we did make on weapons stockpiles inside Syria. So again, our overarching theme is that we want good neighbourly relations with Syria, but in the last 48 hours, the IDF has struck the most strategic weapon stockpiles in Syria. We've prevented them from falling into the hands of terrorist elements. Yes, of course, we want liberty to blossom and flourish in Syria, but our eyes are very wide open about who these rebels are. We wish them success for the good of the people of Syria, but we know precisely what their lineage is, what their heritage is. So on Monday night, our action against, for instance, the naval operations took place. Our Navy missile ships struck 2 Syrian naval facilities simultaneously in the Al-Baida port and Latakia port, where 15 Syrian naval vessels were docked. What were our targets? They were dozens of sea-to-sea missiles with ranges of 80 to 190 kilometers, and they were destroyed. We've taken those pieces off the chessboard. Each missile carried significant explosive payloads, posing threats to civilian and military maritime vessels in our area. Our Air Force and manned aircraft flew hundreds of hours over Syrian airspace. We conducted over 350 aerial strikes together with fighter jets, and a wide range of targets were struck, including anti-aircraft batteries, Syrian Air Force airfields, and dozens of weapons production sites in Damascus, in Homs, in Tartus, in Latakia, in Palmyra. Many strategic weapons were neutralized. Scud missiles, which were used against us by Iraq in the past, cruise missiles, surface-to-sea, surface-to-air, and surface-to-surface missiles, UAVs, fighter jets, attack helicopters, radars, tanks, hangars, and more. Our Northern Command's Fire Control Center conducted strikes on 130 assets in Syria, weapons depots, military structures, launchers, and firing positions. None of these weapons need to be in the hands of jihadists. And the Prime Minister made a point yesterday that this is precisely what the British Air Force did when it bombed the fleet of the Vichy regime in the early 1940s, which was cooperating with the Nazis. And the reason that the British Air Force did that was precisely for the same reason, so that these weapons and these capabilities would not fall into Nazis' hands, and for us, obviously, into jihadists' hands. Okay, next question is from Ruth Eglash from AFP, Agence France Presse. According to a report published by International Federation of Journalists yesterday, more than half of the 100, and this is your question, more than half of the 104 journalists killed in the past year were killed by Israel in Gaza. 55 Palestinian media professionals and 138 Palestinian journalists. Could you respond to those statistics and to claims that Israel purposely targets Palestinian journalists? Thank you, from Ruth Eglash at AFP. Thank you for that question, Ruth. So we would strenuously challenge those figures. Let me tell you why. Firstly, that Israel, of course, does not target journalists. Indeed, I will remind you that it was a BBC journalist that was taken hostage in 2007, a fact which seems to have many people have forgotten. He was taken hostage and he was only released after a huge international campaign. This huge international campaign for the freedom of this BBC journalist resulted in Hamas setting him free. So we know that these huge international campaigns do have an effect. Sadly, we've not seen enough of an international campaign to get Hamas to release our 100 hostages still in Gaza, still in Hamas's captivity. Almost no news gets out of Gaza without it being cleared by Hamas. This is less true now because we have massively degraded Hamas. We believe we've killed around 20,000 of Hamas terrorists. So we believe that we've massively downgraded Hamas, but almost no news leaves without it being cleared by Hamas. Indeed, it's difficult to be a journalist and be independent in Hamas in Gaza because Hamas will pay you a visit and will silence you if you do not comply. This is a point which is never made by international media. Hamas control their story and they control what goes out. They are no strangers, an organization that engages in genocide, in the killing of whole families, on the burning of people, in rape, in the appalling torture of our people. None of us should be surprised that they lie about what comes out journalistically. None of those figures look correct. Another element, of course, is that many of these so-called journalists on this list, which you quote, Ruth, are actually Hamas operatives. We have provided the international community with lots of evidence. Not only are there photos of journalists or so-called pseudo-journalists inside Gaza hugging Sinwar, the dastardly leader of Hamas, embracing him, or of journalists, including journalists which are employed by Reuters and other major news agencies, including those journalists who have praised Hamas's murder against our people and have praised Hamas's tactics. So none of us should be surprised that these are, we don't believe these figures are correct. Of course, any genuine journalist who has been killed, that would certainly be extremely regretful by the State of Israel. We pride ourselves on the freedom of press in our country and around the world. It's a badge of freedom which this country wears with pride, and it's a symbol. Press freedom is a symbol of a free society, and it's something we very much value here in Israel. So we don't accept these figures. We don't believe they are correct. We know that Hamas controls the agenda. We know that probably most journalists inside Gaza are operating under the auspices of Hamas. And until Hamas are destroyed, they will not be allowed to report freely. And if not, then many of these journalists are actually working together with Hamas. Next question here is from Howard Goller from Reuters, and your question, Howard, is that Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar voiced optimism this week about a possible ceasefire hostage deal soon. What reasons are there for greater optimism today? And then you ask, how much of a difference does it make that Biden administration and Trump team are working together on this? And when tomorrow is Jake Sullivan seeing the Prime Minister? Okay, let me deal with those questions one by one. The first part of your question is optimism about a hostage release deal soon. Well, Howard, thank you very much for that question. The first thing I want to share with you is that we have, as a rule, not been negotiating from this podium, but I can share with you reasons for optimism. And they are simply this, that Iran has been exposed. They have been weakened. We know that Hamas has been their strength has been greatly reduced. We know that the Bashar Assad regime has fallen in Syria. We know that Hezbollah has been set back decades and their military capabilities have been greatly diminished. So the axis of evil which was surrounding this country has been greatly diminished. As a result, Howard, Hamas are eviscerated, and this means that they are isolated. Hamas are isolated. So, look, from October the 7th, we have wanted to get a hostage deal. We've wanted to get our people out. So the reasons for the optimism, as you shared by our foreign minister, are precisely is that all these scenarios have taken place. So Hamas is isolated, and we are in negotiations for a deal. We've always been in negotiations for a deal, but we are willing to think creatively. We are looking to work, and we are working with our partners in the international world, obviously with the US, but also with Egypt on our southern border. We want to work with creative solutions because we need to get our people out. 432 days is an appalling amount of time for our people to be held. It is a humanitarian crime, and they need to be set free right now. So those are the reasons for optimism. Hamas is isolated, and that's why we are hopefully moving towards what we hope will be a deal. The proviso I would give you, Howard, is that at every single moment when we have been close, it has been Hamas which has walked away. The Americans have made that clear many, many times. Hamas have walked away. But we want a better future for Gazans. A Gaza free of Hamas is a Gaza which can be a place where our moderate Arab allies in this region can work together with us to provide a better future for Gazans people, a Gaza free of Hamas. Okay. Next question you asked was, how much of a difference does it make that Biden administration and Trump team are working together on this? Look, the Prime Minister made very clear that he thanked President Trump for his forthright words when it comes to the releasing our hostages, getting them released. And of course, the Prime Minister's also made extremely clear the appreciation which we have in this country to the Biden administration for all their work in trying to get the hostages out. It is unfortunately Hamas which is holding them, and Hamas which refuses to set them free, and Hamas which have walked away from every single deal. We hope that that changes now. We, on Israel's point of view, are willing to be creative about how to get our people out, and we will certainly do everything. We will leave no stone unturned to get our people home as soon as possible. Time is of the essence. We know that dozens of our hostages are alive. Many, unfortunately, have been killed by Hamas already, but dozens are alive, and they need to come home right now. From Israel's point of view, we'll do everything in our power to get them home. The last part of your question is when tomorrow is Jake Sullivan seeing the Prime Minister? It is our practice, Howard, not to share the details of meetings before they happen, and so we'll be able to report on that afterwards. Next question here is from Mark Weiss from Khan English Radio. Any update on southern Lebanon? Have the Lebanese armed forces started to deploy? have any IDF troops left the area? Thank you for that question, Mark. That is a question for the IDF, who will be able to give you a more precise answer to that because they are closely involved in that situation. We've made clear what our position is when it comes to the ceasefire agreement. Fire will be met by fire and peace will be met by peace. The difference between this deal and deals which have happened in the past is enforcement. Israel will enforce this deal. When Hezbollah seek to enter areas where they should not be, when they fire at us, when they threaten our forces or our country, we will attack them. Fire will be met by fire. We want this ceasefire deal to work for people on both sides of the Israel-Lebanese border. But if the deal is not, the deal will be enforced by Israel, and we will ensure that Hezbollah are not between the area of the Litani River and our border, and that the Lebanese army are taking the place of Hezbollah. Could you just scroll up for a second? Because there was a question up there. Okay. Question from Joel Pollock. Question from Joel Pollock at Breitbart News. Firstly, Paraguay opened its embassy in Jerusalem today. Is there an expectation that more countries will do so after the new administration takes office? Thank you for that question, Joel. The answer to that question is yes. I won't add too many more to that. Number two, the US has a policy that a sitting leader of government cannot be charged or compelled to testify in a criminal trial while in office. Should Israel adopt such a policy given the ongoing war? Thank you for that question, Joel. Let me answer you this way, Joel. It is a symbol of the strength and the freedom of our democracy, of the rule of law, of due process being taken forward and adhered to. It's almost impossible to imagine anything like this happening in any other country in our region. And we look forward to the day when the legal system in other countries and the democracy and the freedom is so ingrained that these sorts of things can happen in other countries. So it's a strength of our democracy. The Prime Minister has made his views on this issue abundantly clear, as his legal team, and that's about as much as I'm going to say on that. The third part of your question is the story of Hanukkah, says Joel Pollock at Breitbart News, involved a victory over the Syrian Greeks. Given the holiday season, is Israel drawing parallels to the current situation in Syria? Thank you for that question, Joel. It's true that this year Hanukkah and Christmas do coincide. The story of Hanukkah is exactly as you say, the triumph of good over evil. It's a triumph of religious freedom. As you say, the forces against the Jewish people sought to wipe out our people and our adherence and to our traditions. They did not manage, and the mighty Maccabees were able to rededicate the temple in Jerusalem. And we still celebrate that fact today. So, as many times in the past, forces have come against this country to seek to either wipe out our traditions, our adherence to our traditions, to seek to ensure that our identity is destroyed, if not our physical identity is destroyed. And they have not managed, and for that we are celebrating, and that will be celebrated around the world by Jewish communities. And today, as in over thousands and thousands of years, it's a very special time for Jewish people, and certainly the similarity between our enemies in Syria, the Assad regime that had harbored Iran, that had harbored Hezbollah, that had tried to develop a nuclear weapon. Let's not forget, also within their borders, a nuclear reactor that Israel destroyed, that had spent so much of its resources, so much of Iran's resources, which had been wasted on their effort to destroy this country. All their plans have come to nothing. So we look forward to a better future for Syria, and certainly for Syria's people. Okay, next question from Hannah Julian at the Jewish Press. Is there any information about what's happening in Syria right now? Specifically, are there truth to the reports of Taliban-like behavior by the new regime? And finally, does this pose a threat to northern Israel? Thank you for that question, Hannah. Hannah, I gave a fairly comprehensive briefing to earlier on, but let me say this again, that here in Israel, we of course hope for the best, as many other countries hope for the best. We do not have the luxury to wait and see what happens when it comes to Syria. Yes, of course, we'd like to have good neighbourly relations, but we must defend ourselves. Our eyes are wide open. They are wide open. So I think I'll leave it at that without saying any more. And the final question here from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News is one of Israel's purposes in attacking Syrian weapon stockpiles and air defences to clear a pathway for possible attack on Iran's nuclear facilities? Thank you for that question. Joel, I've laid out the reasons why the IDF took the action that it took against Syria. Yes, of course, we want this is a historic time for the people of Syria and for the Middle East. It's the end of tyranny in Damascus, and it certainly does offer a great opportunity, but there are significant dangers for Israel. So our forceful action against Hezbollah and against Iran, Assad's main supporters, they were used by Assad's enemies. It set off a chain reaction for those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and oppression. But it also means, and this is the answer to your question, that Israel has had to take action against possible threats. Now, one of these has been the collapse of the Separation Forces Agreement, which has stood for 50 years. With the Syrian army having abandoned its positions, we gave our forces the role to take over these positions and ensure there were no jihadis forces right on our border, or Hezbollah for that matter, embedded right on our border. And we've made clear that this is a temporary defensive position until a suitable arrangement can be found. So yes, of course, we put out our hand to peace to all those beyond our border in Syria, to the Druze, to the Kurds, to the Christians, and to, of course, to the Muslims who want to live in peace with Israel. But we are following events extremely carefully. Our eyes are wide open. And when it comes to Iran, we've made our position extremely clear when it comes to Iran. Iran have, unfortunately, they are the head of the octopus. Israel has destroyed major parts of Iran's air defense systems and missile manufacturing capabilities, and we've demolished a significant component of their nuclear program. So we believe that Iran is exposed. So together with our allies, we will prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. That has always been our top priority. Okay, that's the last question. Are we sure that's the last question? Yeah, that is the last question. So thank you for joining us today. Please do stay safe and be in touch in the usual way if we can be of assistance. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.